Good afternoon and welcome to the May 2023 webinar put on by the Dibble Institute. We're really happy to welcome a team here from Mathematica who are all pros in continuous quality improvement. And I'm confident that we all, including us at the Dibble Institute, will learn a lot from them. A couple of housekeeping tips. If during this broadcast you can't hear us, it might be us, but my experience is it's usually the person at the other end, meaning you. So if you can't hear us, log out, log back in, or use the phone and call in. But we will record this, we will archive this, and if you need to refer back to it or work with your, or send it to staff, we're happy to have you do that. We love people continuing to use these resources. There's several ways that we're going to have you interact with us and the content today. The Mathematica team will be using Mentimeter, and they will give you those instructions. It will require the use of your phone, so keep your cell phone handy. We will also be asking you to there's a on your side. This is for those of you who can't. On the panel, you'll see a question box, and we're going to ask a question in there during the middle of this presentation for you to respond to, so please respond there. Also, if you have other questions, I'll be monitoring that box, and we will get your questions answered. So, and finally, you have a hand option, and that hand option is on your panel. So would you please raise your hand if this is your first ever Dibble Institute webinar? Your first ever Dibble Institute webinar. Please raise your hand. Okay. All righty. Well, it looks like most of you are returnees, are vets of the webinar, so you know all about it. And to those of you who are new, we welcome you, and I hope this is the first of many. We do these webinars every second Wednesday of the month, except for December, when we take off time for good behavior. Anyway, did I say I'm Kay Reed, Executive Director of the Dibble Institute? If I didn't, I'm saying it now. All righty. So a few things about the Dibble Institute. We'll make this super snappy. We were founded by this couple, Charlie and Helen Dibble. Charlie was an engineer, fix-it kind of guy, saw his young friends experiencing difficulties in their own lives in terms of building relationships, healthy, long-lasting relationships, saw difficulties in his young friends' lives when their parents' relationships and marriages became troubled. And so he went to researchers of the day, this would be, decades ago, and got lots of information about what made for long-lasting, happy, healthy, stable relationships. But when they said, what are you doing for kids? They went, no, we don't know. That's super hard. We're not going to try to do that. So Charlie had the vision of reaching out to kids, to teens and young adults with this really critical information. So today, the vision that Charlie had has now morphed or blossomed, maybe even a better word, into a national independent nonprofit organization serving young people in every state. And when we say serving, I put air quotes around that because while we are not direct service providers, we rely and are so grateful for all of you out there who are providing direct services to young people. And thanks to your good work, we, again, air quotes, reached over 120,000 young people. That's our very conservative estimate of last year's work. So thank you for that. And if you haven't joined us yet, I hope you give us, some serious consideration when you have an opportunity to work in this space. All righty, next slide. Our mission, we're really focused on helping young people in their intimate relationships, navigate those. We talk to kids a lot about sex. We may talk to them about bullying. We may talk to them about, getting along better with their parents or their coworkers. But we never, ever, rarely talk about intimate relationships, my dating life, my infatuations, how do I decide, how do I choose, how do I go deeper, how do I get out, how is it safe? And so the Dibble Institute really specializes in making it easy and comfortable for people to teach this information, all based on research. So, which leads me to my next slide, which is our key values. We're big fans of research. All our materials are based on research, and we research them or cause them to be researched because we want to know what effect they have and also how to make them better. But for you, what it means is that you can be confident that you're teaching the latest. We just did a major revision of our two main programs, Relationship Smarts Plus and Love Notes. Those were just released earlier this year. And so all the stats are up to date, and we have the latest on consent and trafficking and other things that are very important to young people. So there's a whole, if you get to our website, there's a whole section on research. You can dive in. It's super fun, at least for those of us who like research. Okay, Esther's moving me along. So we also are big fans of safe, stable, and nurturing families, and we know they can come in many iterations. So whether it's a single parent raising children, or co-parents, or grandparents, or a married couple, or a cohabiting couple, what we're really wanting young people to achieve is developing the stability, the nurturing capacity, and the healthiness of a family unit, so their children are prepared and ready to be the best people they can be. So we don't, so that's what we do. We're big fans of families that are safe, stable, and nurturing. Alrighty, finally, so we're in the relationship education space. We're going to be talking about not that topic today per se. We're talking about how we can make relationship education better. But what we do believe is that relationship education is for everyone. It's for the young, it's for the old, it's for the in-between, it's for, doesn't matter who you love, doesn't matter how you identify, doesn't matter your race or ethnicity. We all can be better at relationships. And so we write our programs to be very inclusive, and hit lots of diverse audiences. We do co-design in terms of help, talking to people in the field and talking to end users to make sure we're hitting the right point. So don't think, well, that doesn't apply to me. It applies to all of us. So, all righty. Finally, I'd like to introduce and welcome to the stage, as it were, the three presenters we have for today. And in what is both alphabetical and order of presentation, we have Alan Kalischer, who has a unique skill set in that he actually did child welfare work for the state of Connecticut, and he does CQI, likes the stats, and so he has a unique skill set of being both a practitioner and a CQI guy. Annie Buonaspina lives in New Jersey, and she currently provides TA on CQI issues across a variety of grant programs, SRA grantees. She's done work with TPP grantees, and so some of you may recognize some of our presenters today from your previous work, their previous work with your grant. And finally, Dr. Scott Richmond is a senior researcher at Mathematica. He has a lot of experience, a lot of credentials in this space, and supports the Healthy Marriage and Responsible Fatherhood grantees. I believe this whole team is on that team. So they can give you more specific knowledge, but this is just to say we've got the pros here. And if you wanted to know about CQI, this is the place to be. And if you have questions, please let us know, because they're happy to answer them for you. So without further ado, would Alan please turn on his camera? There it goes.
Thank you very much, Kay. So good afternoon, everybody. I am Alan Kalischer, as Kay just mentioned. Have been around this work for a long time, struggled with it in practice, and tried to figure out sort of the best way to utilize frameworks like continuous quality improvement and others to try to advance achieving outcomes for those that I served, and spent a lot of time also just learning about that before I joined Mathematica. I am the lead for our team that provides a CQI training and technical assistance for to HMRF grantees. Some of you may be in that one of them, so you may know us, others may know of them. And Annie and Scott and I have been working together now for some years in this. We've actually, Mathematica has been doing CQI training and technical assistance for several years now. So we're very glad to be with you today. You'll meet Annie and Scott in a bit. We're going to be talking to you about continuous quality improvement, or CQI, and offer you some resources that we hope that you'll find useful as you work to strengthen your improvement practices for your program. So let me just say a little bit more about our goals. We are hoping to offer you a foundational understanding about CQI, what it is, what are the key steps and considerations, and how might you begin or continue your efforts to strengthen your CQI practice. Along the way, we're going to highlight resources that you can access in the future as you seek to implement new practices where you work. You can consider this webinar really an introduction to CQI and an orientation to a resource library that is aimed to help you implement or strengthen your CQI practices. So we realize that CQI may be a brand new concept for some of you, while others may have some or even potentially a lot of familiarity with it. We've designed this presentation with that in mind. I'm going to start with an overview of CQI, and then Annie's going to offer suggestions for programs that want to get started with CQI, and then Scott's going to provide ideas for teams that have some or even advanced experience with CQI. So let's start with defining what is CQI. CQI is a process for identifying, describing, and analyzing problems, and then implementing strategies to test, learn from those tests in order to revise, and then ultimately scale successful strategies. Sorry, I just lost my place for a second. As the name suggests, CQI is a continuous cyclical process with the goal of making improvements. It's intended to help you systematically address priority challenges by providing a framework for testing new strategies, collecting feedback on how well they're implemented, and whether they show promise for addressing those priority challenges. As you'll hear us say during this presentation, CQI is something that also helps teams define priority challenges and stay focused on addressing one issue at a time. This is not to say that programs should or can ignore multiple challenges, but it is about investing special effort on what matters most so that you have the best chance of impacting those challenges. So how do you do it? There are more than one model of CQI, but they all share basic ingredients, which we summarize into 5 steps. But first, it's worth saying that a CQI process is pretty challenging, if not impossible, to follow without a dedicated team to guide the work. We're gonna talk about that in a bit, but I wanna start by just going through what those process steps are. It begins with identifying a priority challenge and then setting a goal. The next major step is to design your improvement strategy that you will test out. The test, which we call a road test, is the third step. And then once your test is complete and you've settled on a working strategy, then your next step is to implement the strategy across your program and monitor it. A final step is to communicate the results of your CQI cycle to other staff and partners and to plan next steps. So in the CQI process I just talked about, you may have heard me describe some familiar process of some things that feel familiar to you. But how is this different than monitoring your program and monitoring and making routine adjustments? The biggest thing that distinguishes improvement work with CQI is the systematic nature of the improvement process, which helps you to understand the root causes of your challenge, design well-informed strategies, and then test them on a small scale so you can examine how well they're implemented and whether they're showing promise to address your challenge. The CQI process does take some investment of time and effort, but it increases your chance for success, and in the long run, that helps you save time. Next slide, please. So I don't want to give you the impression that program monitoring is bad. In fact, it's a critical part of what you need to do to flag areas for improvement and determine what issue to take on with CQI. But it is different. CQI is the process for improving once you have determined a priority challenge area. So let's take a look at an example. On this slide, you can see a graphic showing 2 bars displaying the average percent of workshop hours that clients attend. The first bar shows that clients attended an average of 60% of workshop hours, and the second bar shows clients attended an average of 54% of workshop hours. The trend is going in the wrong direction, and the program's goal is 90%. So naturally, this is something a program would want to be on top of through program monitoring. And you can imagine why a program might decide that this is a priority challenge that they want to address, given this trend. With CQI, the program will dig into the reasons why this is a challenge and develop a solution and test it. It's clear that there's been a low and declining rate of participation in workshops, but why? Answering that well, or at least coming up with a well-educated guess, will help the team to design a strategy to test. The team will have to consider what data to collect for their road test, and then they have to have a plan to analyze that data to inform next steps. So when we think about this, how could CQI benefit your program? First, I want to point out that there are other ways that CQI can help your team, because CQI involves a systematic approach to improvement efforts, which includes getting the right perspectives to inform challenges and strategies and focus on communication. Staff are less apt to feel change fatigue and are more apt to be bought into improvement efforts. And of course, if you're successful, which CQI gives you a better chance at being, that helps a great deal with getting staff buy-in and feeling like they're part of a process. So who should be involved in CQI? Pretty much everyone who has a role to play in your program should be part of CQI in one way or another. Some may contribute their insights, others may be involved in testing strategies, but as I mentioned before, you'll want to have a designated team to guide the work. Annie will be offering ideas for setting up a team very shortly, but since I've talked quite a bit now, I want to pause for a minute and hear from you. This is where we get to try out Mentimeter. So you should be getting a link, I believe, in the chat. And yeah, I'm seeing it in the chat now. And so if you click on that link, it'll take you to a Menti poll. And we'd love for you to just, share with us how much you're doing CQI already. You should see response options for we're just starting out. We have some program improvement practices, but need help pulling it all together. Or we have a solid CQI approach and practices to support it, but we're hoping to learn more. All right, we're starting to see results coming in. Right now, some practices and needing help to pull it all together is the mode for you statistics friendly people. That just means the option that has the most responses. And I see that we're just starting out is the next most represented group, and there's still, though, a good portion of you who have a solid approach to practices. Let's see give you a chance for some other people to respond, and now it looks like the first two options are roughly the same. Now you are the same. So we'll wait another 10 seconds or so to make sure people who are trying to respond have a chance to see it. Oh, a little bit more. Now that just starting out is the most represented group, but by a hair. Well, this is giving us a pretty good idea of what the distribution is. We're going to assume that about Looks like not quite a third of each of you, but a little bit more are just starting out or have some practices in place and are looking to get some help to pull it all together. So great. I will then turn it over to Annie so that she can get us started.
Yep, thank you, Alan. So Alan gave a nice introduction to CQI, but you may be wondering at this point, particularly as it sounded like a lot of you are kind of just getting going with CQI, about how to apply that to your program. And I think that really depends on what your starting place is. So for example, you might be just starting out, or maybe you feel like you have some strong practices in place to support learning and improvement, but you don't have a cohesive approach yet, and you want to be more organized with your CQI. Or you might feel really good about your practices, but you're here because in the spirit of improvement, you're just looking for areas to get better. And so we wanted to explore these 3 jumping off points today. And also, as Alan mentioned, we're going to offer some resources that we think could help support some of these aims. And so we'll start with those of you who are just starting out. A good starting place if you're just beginning to build CQI capacity is to start and establish a CQI team. So the role of the CQI team is to oversee all of the CQI work within your program. It's a team that's generally distinct from other programmatic teams, or at least if you have a small program and everybody's on the team, you want to have distinct meetings that are focused just on improvement. Because that both signals the importance of this work, but it also keeps it from getting pushed aside as other issues or fires come up that you need to attend to. So if you schedule time for CQI, it's going to be more likely to happen amongst other concerns that day. Alan talked a bit about the difference between program monitoring and CQI and how they're distinct processes. Often, though, the CQI team would oversee both of these because they're really the team who's responsible for identifying and prioritizing challenges based on what they're seeing both in the data, but also what they're hearing on the ground. Related to overseeing CQI work, the team would also partner with staff to learn about challenges, co-create strategies for improvement, oversee piloting, or what we refer to as road testing those strategies, and generally monitoring the success of program changes. In a broader sense, the CQI team are the champions of learning and improvement at the program. So they contribute to a culture of learning. And they do this by gathering feedback on how to address challenges from staff and really promoting an inclusive approach to improvement that emphasizes that everybody has a role in supporting these conversations. So it's not just the job of the data and evaluation people at your organization or this specific CQI team, but it really falls to everybody. So that's the role of the team. We wanted to get into some of the details. So obviously your team should look however you think is best for your program or for your organization. But here we're sharing just some common characteristics. They're usually about 3 to 5 people. But again, if you have a smaller program and you want to include your whole staff on the team, it might end up being bigger than that. As I shared earlier, it's really important to carve out time for the work to ensure that it happens. And so it's best if this is a distinct team, if that's possible for your program. In terms of frequency of meeting, it really depends on what works for your team, but also potentially where you are in the CQI cycle. So for instance, if you're actively road testing a strategy, you may meet weekly during testing to check in, and then meet monthly at other times during the cycle when things are slower. There are some designated roles that should be represented on the CQI team. The most important thing is that your CQI team represents diverse perspectives, because hearing from staff at different positions in your program can offer different insights into what contributes to challenges and also might generate a wider range of improvement ideas. But some of the key roles that we often see on teams, you want to have somebody obviously be the CQI team lead. So this is the person who's going to direct the team. They may be setting the meeting agendas, ensuring that the team stays on track, and overseeing all of the CQI efforts. It's also helpful to have a data manager on the team. So this is a person who understands how to access and present data to others on the team, as well as to broader staff at the organization. And this really includes a range of skills. So from analyzing your organization's participant data system, analyzing surveys that you might collect during a pilot or a road test, and even designing qualitative collection tools and reviewing that qualitative data. So things like transcripts from interviews or focus groups that you may conduct. Those are all helpful skills to support CQI. If you either have somebody internally who could fill that role, or maybe you're working with an external evaluator who can help you with that. Improvement advisors are often on-the-ground staff. We've also seen some programs include participants or partners on the team. And so the role of the improvement advisors is to contribute knowledge about what factors might be driving challenges, and then use that on-the-ground knowledge to generate promising ideas for improvement. They might also be able to help with interpreting data that you collect in a road test. So for example, if you're reviewing survey results, it can be helpful to have input from staff and participants to make sense of those results. And then lastly is training supervisors. So as the name suggests, these are people who are often in supervisory roles in your program who can help to oversee implementation of improvement strategies on the ground. So for instance, if your CQI team decides to implement a new facilitation approach in class, the supervisor who oversees the facilitators in your program can ensure that they're trained, that they understand the new approach, and then that same supervisor can oversee implementation to ensure the strategy is implemented as designed. Your CQI lead is not necessarily going to be on the ground, so that's why it's helpful to have someone with decision-making authority on the ground who can make sure that the improvement strategy moves forward and is implemented well. Because that way you can pilot it and you can accurately assess how it works, which is what you're aiming to do. That said, these roles don't have to be distinct. It's possible that you have a supervisor in your program who's really interested and excited by data and improvement, and they can serve as a CQI lead. Or we often see that the data manager takes on the role of the CQI lead as well. So if you're interested in maybe starting a team, if you don't already have one, we have a number of resources that we wanted to share with you today related to the CQI team. So here we're showing a brief that offers an introduction to CQI teams and just covers some common questions about composition and management of the team. And I do want to note that these are linked in the slides, so you can use the direct links if you want to find them on the site more easily when the Dibble Institute sends out slides in a few days. Otherwise, we're also going to provide a more general link at the end of this session today. If you're just creating a new team, a great first step is to draft a team agreement together. This is really about expectation setting. So this team agreement template that we're showing right now covers considerations like setting a vision for the team, outlining roles and responsibilities. So again, you want everyone to be clear about what's expected of them and how they should be participating on the team. You might also specify how the team communicates internally with each other, but also externally. So how will the CQI team communicate with other teams in the program or with leadership at your organization? And then one really important factor to specify is how is the team going to make decisions? So team members might not always agree about next steps related to improvement. So what's going to be your process for resolving disagreements and making those decisions? And related to that, we have a tip sheet that touches on just that topic and offers a few ways that you can make decisions collaboratively. So you'll be clear on your team agreement about how you're going to make decisions. And it's quite possible that that's just having the CQI team lead be the final say, which is fine if you all agree on that approach. That's a perfectly acceptable structure. If you are interested in exploring some consensus-based approaches, this tip sheet is really focused on those, and it shares a couple of those and then also links to some other decision-making models. Here we're showing another tangible tool, which is the sample team meeting agenda. So if you're not sure how to run a CQI team meeting, this agenda offers one approach to doing that using an effective technique for reviewing data together, which is called, some of you may be familiar, it's called what, so what, now what. And so this tool kind of goes through the steps in that and help you to learn more about that tool, that approach. Related to the team agenda is this tip sheet that provides a few facilitation strategies that you can use with your team. So this is a resource in particular that we hope will be helpful to you, whether you are just starting out or you've had a team for a while. When you run your team meetings, Of course, there's going to be a place for unstructured conversations. But if you're finding that your team often drifts from the agenda or doesn't make it through the agenda, it could be helpful to try a more structured approach to facilitation. And these techniques, I think, can also be helpful if you're finding that just one or two people are participating in your meetings. I think sometimes if you have people like what we encourage with the CQI team, where you're mixing leadership and frontline staff, or particularly if you have a participant on the team, power dynamics can sometimes come into play. So using more structured facilitation strategies can help to foster a space where people feel comfortable participating. And that's really the goal, because that's how you're able to draw on diverse perspectives, which can be so helpful to CQI. I mentioned that one consideration in the agreement relates to communication and how the team is going to communicate externally. This team communication processes worksheet just offers a few questions for your team to consider as you're planning your approach. And I think this is a really important point that you don't want to overlook, because if you're doing the work of improvement within your team and you're not sharing with others at your organization about what the CQI team is working on or what you're doing or learning, it's going to be a lot harder to make changes stick and sustain the improvement that you've worked so hard for. So you want to be proactive and thinking through how you're going to communicate with others throughout your work. And then the last resource that we wanted to share today is a tip sheet related to team composition. So when you're considering who to include on your team, this just offers some guidance on how to consider whether you're representing key perspectives. And again, like some of the other tip sheets, I think this one could be helpful, even if you already have a CQI team, if you're not starting from the ground level, because you can use it to assess your current team. So is your team representing all of the necessary perspectives, and how can you improve if not? So those are just a few resources to support getting started with the CQI team, which as we said, is a great first step. And now we're going to try Menti again. So we have another poll for all of you. So you have a couple of options. The link to the Menti is the same one. So you can just go back to the link in the chat and use that, and I will advance the question. Or you're also free to enter menti.com and enter the code that you see on the slide there. And now you should be able to see our new question, which is, do you have a dedicated team for CQI? If you're still looking at the slide, we do have a follow-up for all of you that we're going to try out and see how that works. But let's start with this Menti question. So I'll give everyone a moment to think about that and respond. So it's great to see so far that the majority of you are at least talking about CQI in your team meetings, which I think is really common to have CQI as more of an agenda item during program meetings. But I'm seeing that a lot of you do actually have a team that's dedicated to CQI, which is wonderful as well. Like I said before, we really encourage, if it's possible for your team, I know there's lots of meetings happening all the time, but we encourage having distinct meetings so that you can make sure that you're able to focus just on that topic. And a few of you don't have a team yet, but are open to considering it. So we do have a follow-up. I see for those of you who answered that you do have a CQI team. We were interested in hearing who is on your team and what are some of those key perspectives that you're representing. So I'm not sure if I'm able to see the responses, but I would love it if people would be willing to share using the questions tool. Who do you have on the team, and what were some of the important perspectives that you want to make sure were on your team? I think that might be especially helpful for those of you who don't have a team yet to hear what everyone else is doing.
So this is Kay. Once you put in the question box, write your answer to what Annie said. Who's on your team? What do they bring to the team? If you could write that in the answer of the question box, and I will share those with Annie and the rest of you.
Great, thank you, Kay.
So those of you who said you had a team, who's on the team? Let's start with the easy one. Who's on your team? Are you on the team? A mix of, Katie says, a mix of supervisors and specialists. Alexa says we have a dedicated quality improvement department and then a QI committee, which includes QI leadership staff and a variety of management at levels throughout the organization. She's the assistant vice president of QI. That's quite impressive. But I'm sure there's lots of people who aren't that, who have something going on. I know that in the Dibble Institute, we have a mid-level management team that functions as our QI team. So here we go. Deja says, data manager, principal investigator, project manager, program coordinator, outreach coordinator, local evaluator. So lots of different people on that team.
Yeah. No, that's great to hear. I mean, it sounds like from a lot of the people who have responded that you do have a mix of different people. So like with that last one, we'd love to hear that you have program coordinators and kind of on the ground staff on your team in addition to your data folks. Okay, well, that's great. Thank you so much, Kay. I appreciate you sharing those responses.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody.
So I think we're going to move along. So with that, I'll turn it over to Scott to talk through some of the other potential jumping off points.
Great, thanks, Annie. So Annie discussed a lot of great resources that can be helpful for when you're just getting started with your CQI, but perhaps you and your team are already using some program improvement processes, but you want to identify a few ways to pull it all together in a structured way. So I'm going to speak to some practices and resources that can be a help to you in that effort. So first, I want to highlight the importance of using a structured approach for guiding your CQI work. A clear and comprehensive improvement approach is beneficial to use because it helps to set expectations for your staff about CQI, and it supports a culture of learning. So with a step-by-step systematic approach, everyone on your team knows what's being worked on, the purpose of each activity, and how one activity helps to inform the one that's coming next. A structured approach can also help your team see that big picture of where it's ultimately heading with its CQI work, and that can help everyone on the team know what they need to do throughout the CQI process. Having a specific plan to guide your work can also keep your team staying focused and organized. Your team is methodically taking things one step at a time, and because of that, everyone is thinking about the same thing and working about the same thing. And if everyone's rowing in the same direction, you're more likely to keep your CQI work moving forward and make progress towards addressing that programmatic challenge of yours. So using a structured approach will help make your CQI efforts more intentional because every step has a specific purpose that needs to be completed before moving on to the next step. Baking a cake is an analogy I often think about when it comes to using a structured approach. Yes, you can grab a whole bunch of ingredients and start combining them based on what you think makes the most sense, and maybe the cake will turn out all right, but maybe it won't. But if you have a recipe for those ingredients and follow the sequence of steps one at a time, you're more likely to have a great cake that you can make over and over again. And CQI is the same way. Having a designated approach can enhance the intentionality of your improvement efforts and make sure you're going through all the important steps and in the right order. And by doing that, your CQI efforts are more likely to be successful. So to help organizations conduct their CQI work in a more systematic way, we developed a template that teams can use to plan out and carry out their CQI activities. The template aligns to a series of steps, which you can see on the graphic in the slide. And in just a moment, I'll briefly discuss each of these steps in a little bit more detail. But overall, the template is designed to keep teams organized around what they need to work on for each step. And it's also a place, the template, where teams can write down their intended approach so that everyone's on the same page, and also to document the learning that's arising along the way. All right, so here are the sections you'll find in the CQI template, all of which are important and intended to be followed in this particular order. And you can see a few screenshots of what the template sections themselves look like. So step one of the template begins with identifying the program challenge you want to improve upon. And then you're setting a goal of what success would look like if you're able to address that challenge. In step 2, your team then needs to identify a strategy that you think will address the underlying issue associated with that programmatic challenge. And here you're thinking through what the strategy is and why you think the strategy will ultimately be successful. And then next, it's time to road test that new strategy idea. And this is when you're trying out the strategy on a small scale for a brief period of time while collecting some data on it to see if it's showing some promise. You would then analyze the road test data to see if you need to make any tweaks to iron out any wrinkles with the strategy. And then from there, you're monitoring the strategy over time to see if it's helping your team make improvements on the challenge you want to address. And then finally, you're planning out and communicating your next steps, whether it's to scale and sustain your new strategy and make it part of your business as usual practice, or you may decide you need to adapt the strategy or abandon it altogether because you weren't quite seeing those improvements that you hoped for. So in the template, each of these steps has a series of questions for you to work through to help you plan out and complete your CQI activities. You may be doing some of these steps already, but some steps may be new to you. And the general idea is that you can try out the template and identify areas that you need to strengthen and put it all your practices together in a more systematic CQI approach. But we all know programs are busy serving clients and have a lot of other things on their plates, and it could feel like there's not as much time for CQI work as you may like. And because of that, there may be places where teams feel they might need to strengthen their CQI work. So in these instances, the template can be used to guide and help you, can be used as a guide to help you determine where you can ultimately do better with your CQI work. So for example, keeping your CQI team engaged can often be a challenge. Staff are busy, they have a lot to do on a day-to-day basis, but it can be, and because of that, it can be difficult to find time to keep the CQI work moving forward. So setting up regularly occurring meetings and using the CQI template can help keep the CQI work on everyone's radar. Sometimes teams will have the urge to begin implementing strategies to fix an issue, and they want to implement it as quickly as possible. So they'll implement a variety of new ideas and hope that one of them will be successful in addressing their challenge. But as I mentioned when discussing the template, it's first actually important to pause and take the time to identify and learn about the challenge you're trying to address. If you take the time and figure out the extent of the problem, where the problem's occurring, and what's creating the problem itself, you're more likely to think of a specific strategy that aligns to what you're trying to fix. It's also important to take the time to set a goal of what success looks like, as this can keep everyone on your team on the same page and provide a clear picture of what you're trying to achieve. It's one thing, for example, to say, we want to increase our program's enrollment, but it's even better to say that we want to increase our program enrollment by 25% in the next 6 months, because this is more concrete and your team will have a better sense of what it's trying to accomplish because of this extra detail. Another example is sometimes teams will launch a new strategy program-wide rather than testing it out first and collecting data on it. If you pilot the strategy, you can determine if it's worth doing or make adjustments to it before rolling it out more broadly program-wide. And taking this approach can help prevent larger issues and can be more, it can ultimately be a more efficient use of your time and resources in the long run. And finally, there are often ways teams can strengthen how they go about communicating program challenges within their organizations, especially if there are staff who are not a part of the CQI work itself. So creating a plan for how you'll communicate your new strategy can make sure you're reaching all the necessary audiences and can help inform the information you need to share with those individuals in order to increase staff buy-in to the new strategy you want to implement. All right, so I just spoke a little bit about the important step of road testing your new strategy before you decide to ultimately implement it more fully program-wide. So we wanted to use another Menti poll to hear from you to get a sense of if and how your team may already be using this important step of road testing. So we're going to launch another Menti poll, and we would love to hear from you. Does your team typically road test new ideas whenever it's pursuing a program change, or maybe you just road test things where you're not sure if it's going to work, or maybe this isn't something your team hasn't tried before. So if we can launch the poll, and great, folks are already responding. So we want to get a sense of if you take your new strategy idea for a little bit of a test spin before you're implementing it more broadly. Great, and so far we're seeing folks who are responding. The overwhelming majority are at least testing it out in some cases, if not all the time, for large changes. And again, the idea is, when you test small, you can correct things on a small scale, and then you know how to best launch it more broadly. So it's great that a lot of folks are already doing that practice. And hopefully a key takeaway from today for those who haven't necessarily tried it is to see some benefits in trying something out, collecting some information on it before you launch something more fully. All right, great. Yeah. So thank you for taking the time to respond. We'll keep moving along. Awesome. But we also want to take some time to recognize that there may be some teams here, and we saw this earlier with one of the first polls, who feel they already have some strong CQI approaches in place, and that's great. But we all know that CQI, of course, is all about learning and improving on a continuous basis. So we wanted to speak a little bit about some ways that you and your team can further enhance or improve upon the CQI work that you may already be doing. All right, so even if you feel you already have a solid approach in place, take the time with your teams to assess and reflect on your current processes and practices to see if there are places you want to do even better. It may be helpful to review the CQI template I just spoke about a little while ago to go over the different steps in it. And in doing so, you may feel, for example, that you can enhance how you approach your road testing, or you can improve upon how you can take the time to learn about your problem and create a more descriptive problem statement. But maybe your team is having a difficult time diagnosing why it's experiencing programmatic issues, or you're in a rut when it comes to generating new strategies to try out. If so, it's helpful in that situation to assess whether your team includes a diverse set of perspectives that can help you see your program from a different point of view. And a lot of you already shared folks that are on your CQI team. So maybe there are places where you feel like you need to add additional perspectives. Teams can also experience challenges with getting members to commit their time to CQI work, or sometimes teams struggle with running efficient meetings, and it's therefore difficult to get things decided or accomplished. So earlier, Annie spoke a little bit about creating a team charter or regularly using meeting agendas, which can help get your team on the same page and get more bought into the CQI process. Gathering feedback from staff or clients, this can also be difficult sometimes to conduct, or maybe the feedback you're collecting from them isn't always as clear or as helpful as you want to be. So if that's the case, we've developed some templates that can help you gather feedback, whether it's through exit tickets you administer after program sessions, or perhaps through brief surveys that you administer to clients or to staff. So those are just a few examples of ways you can look to improve upon your CQI work, but you also might be interested in enhancing some of those internal processes to help make your CQI work even stronger. So Annie discussed a little bit earlier that we have a variety of tip sheets on ways to strengthen your team communication, how you facilitate your CQI meetings, and perhaps being more inclusive in your team decision-making process. And these tip sheets can help provide some ideas that you may want to fold into your team processes and how you ultimately do your CQI work so that you can do that work even better. All right, so we just provided a lot of information on CQI and shared a variety of resources that can help you and your team wherever you are in your CQI journey. So we wanted to pause one last time to hear from you. And so again, using the Menti poll that you see here on the screen, we'd love to hear from you if there's something you learned today or heard about today that perhaps you aren't doing, but you may want to consider trying out or perhaps doing differently when you think about your CQI work. So if you can jump into that poll one more time if you haven't already, and let us know, is there something new or that you've learned today that you'd want to try out? All right, so we see road testing, and I love the extra exclamation points. Yes, road testing, cannot say that highly enough. It will save you a lot of heartache in the long run if you test something out before you implement it more fully. Yep. Piloting, yes, and we're going to share in just a bit the link where you can find a lot of these resources, so stay tuned for there, and hopefully they'll be helpful as you check them out. The roles breakdown, yes. It's really, as Andy was saying earlier, the team is what makes the work, and having a clear sense of who's doing what is really going to be a major catalyst to bringing that CQI work forward. And having a team, it's really easy to, for things to get put to the side. Everyone's super busy, so if you have a team and folks know their role in their team, they know exactly what they need to do, and that really helps keep your CQI work on the radar and moving forward. Great. And I'm seeing one last comment about where we're too broad and having to focus on a topic. Yes, the more you dig into a particular area, all the better, because then you can really dig into, be more focused in your brainstorming.
And Kimberly wrote that she learned about being intentional, about communicating the program's goals.
Yes, communication is key. That's what ultimately keeps everyone on the team on the same page. And then, as I mentioned earlier, there might be folks who are not part of your CQI team, but they need to know about the changes that are happening, because if they don't know about it, then your new strategy that you want to implement isn't going to hit the ground running like you want it to. All right, great. So I'm watching the clock, so I want to make sure we leave plenty of time for questions, and I think we just have a few more slides, and then we can open up for Q&A, because I want to make sure before we close out that we let everyone know where to find all these resources. So on the slide here, you'll see a link for hmrfgrantresources.info, and then continuous quality improvement. So that's where you can currently find the resources that we highlighted today. The resources that will soon be posted on the Office of Planning and Research and Evaluation's website, so OPRE's website. So the Dibble Institute will get a notification once those resources are posted there, and then they can forward all that information to you. So that will be happening in the short term, so stay tuned there. But we wanted to provide an interim link you can use to find these resources. And then last thing we'll say is we wanted to let you know where you can reach out to us if you have any questions. So we're here to support anything CQI, so please feel free to reach out to us at the email that you see on the slide. All right, and then with that, we just wanted to say first thank you to the Dibble Institute for inviting us for today's webinar, and we also wanted to thank you for taking the time out of your busy days for attending and for all the great participation in our Menti polls and in the chat. So thank you all for taking the time with us today. And then with that, Kay, I think we can open up to any questions that have already come in, and if folks want to use the Q&A feature now to enter some questions, please do so.
Right, it's not over till 2 o'clock, so stay tuned. So I have a question. What is the difference between innovation and continuous quality improvement?
That's a great question. So I think to me, they almost go hand in hand. I mean, the idea of innovation is to find new ways to approach something or to enhance what you're already doing. But I think then to do that in the context of CQI is then you're saying, let's go about it in a systematic way in terms of how we come about the idea we want to put forth, what problem are we trying to solve with it, and then most importantly, I think, is bringing data so that as you're innovating, that you're able to get a better sense using data to see, is what we're trying to do better? Are we actually doing better with that approach? And that's where data can help tell a better story than what people think or what they assume. So I think that's where I think the two can really be powerful when you apply them together.
Alan, do you have any thoughts on how innovation science or innovation approaches in CQI? I mean, I appreciated that, Scott. That's a great answer. It's like the process, right, is the CQI innovation. Alan or Annie, any other thoughts on that? I've been thinking a lot about this recently, so.
Yeah, I mean, first off, I love the term innovation because I think it just captures sort of the spirit of the way the mindset that I think we hope for when you're thinking in a CQI mindset. The idea that that strategies can be fashioned and designed through an innovation process. And I was inspired a little bit, if people have ever heard of the organization, I think it's IDEO, that has been a pioneer for innovation practices. They offer really great concepts and tips for an innovation process, which largely embraces some human-centered design principles and things that we often are teaching when we talk about best ways to approach strategy development. So I think it fits so nicely into the ways that CQI is meant to happen, that you actually take the time to really tease apart what are root cause issues, and then use that to kind of think about how might we do something to address those issues. That how might we framework is a setup for innovative thinking. So yeah, I highly encourage more exploration of that, because when it comes to deciding on strategies, it's not always something that's going to be off the shelf, something that's going to be pre-custom or prefab for you. So yeah, look for that. Look for good ways to do it, and you'll have better success, I think.
Yeah. Annie, any thoughts on that question?
I don't know if I have much to add beyond what Scott and Alan said.
Okay.
I do think it kind of speaks to one of the slides that Alan presented on, that programs are changing and innovating all the time. So the difference with CQI is just really bringing the methodical approach for making sure that you're actually learning about what you're doing differently and coming away with some insights about that.
So when I looked at the list of who was attending today, there was a spectrum. People who are, the person, I think it was a woman here, who was the AVP of quality, QI and had, sub people and, big groups. And over here were people, like they and their best friend are running an organization, or, not, but, they're small organization. So I guess my question is, what do you wish you'd known if talking to the people in the small organizations whose hair is on fire and have a lot of things, multiple priorities to pay attention to, like what's the low-hanging fruit? What's the minimum viable product, as they say, to do CQI just on the quick and dirty, not perfectly, but just something? And then to the opposite, and you have like 3 minutes to respond to this. At the opposite end, if you're like an established, well-established QI, where do they go next? So why don't you take each of those spectrums? Go. You have 3 minutes.
I'll offer a quick thought. I know we have so little time, so I'll just jump right in. I think that if you're operating, the mom and pop shop, if you will, then at the very least, one thing to do is to carve out some time and create some discipline around deciding what are the key indicators of success for what we're trying to do. Build some way of tracking whether or not you're getting there, and then and define these use those carve out times on a frequent basis to be able to say, where are our biggest challenges there? Like to do that thought, to make sure you create these pause points in the everyday madness of just managing, so that you have the eye on the prize and you're not letting things sort of just go as they are or up to chance. Increase your chances of getting what it is, the reason why you're doing this work in the first place. It's worth it, and it's difficult to create that discipline at first, but once I think you get into a routine of it, we certainly have seen when we've partnered with folks who've struggled like this, huge payoffs, both on the small and on the large scale programs. So I think that the advice isn't all that different. It's just a matter of, for the larger scale programs, to bring in more people and get more diverse perspectives in that, and then you're really moving the whole engine. Not just sort of taking a specialty carve out look at that when you have a lot of people involved.
That's a good question. Good ideas. Scott, anything to add?
I would just add it. I think when you mentioned like the hair on fire kind of feeling sometimes, which is so common. You want to have a challenge, you want to fix it right away, and I think one thing teams will take the time, they fight that urge to say, let's learn about it, because sometimes we will work with a team, we say, oh, we tried this, and the first question we ask is like, well, why did you think that one was gonna, why that strategy? What is the actual issue you're trying to solve there? It's just, and by sometimes then you're going to realize, oh wait, maybe this strategy wasn't aligned to the problem we're trying to fix. So taking that time to actually learn about your challenge, I think really sets the stage for everything that comes to best practices with CQI principles, whether it's the full cycle or not, but so that you know what you're trying to address more clearly, because that's really then the foundation where great ideas, more targeted ideas come from. And then from the big organization, I'd say is make sure you're thinking about the culture of learning at your organization, so that everyone plays a role, and that top down, bottom up, everyone believes in learning and failing and trying out new ideas.
Thank you, Scott. I think we could go on, and because there's people here from small organizations who are just soaking this up, but we have to stop. So thank you, the three of you. This has been super valuable. We will get you those resources. I'm going to download them myself into my CQI folder. So thank you for joining us. You can look this webinar and watch it later. It'll be on our website. We'll let you know when that happens. Next one. And next month, stay in touch, all the normal ways. And next one, our good friends at Child Friends are going to go over the social genome model. It has to do with teen pregnancy prevention. So it'll be interesting, especially for those of you who like numbers. So there you go. So thank you very much for joining us. Thank you, Alan, Annie, and Scott. And we'll see you next month. Enjoy the spring. Take good care. Bye-bye.